What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. For today's video, thanks to the team over at Shozy Store, we're going to be checking out the Iron Warrior Transformers Prime Leader Optimus Prime. Now, for those of you that want to add one of these guys to your collection, then definitely be sure to head down to the links in the description box below. And this is a figure which I have been so excited to finally get my hands on, because as you all know, for the longest time I've been hoping that a third-party company would release almost masterpiece versions of some of these Prime designs, because they've got to be some of the best animated Transformers that we've ever seen. And I guess technically with the release of this guy, we're kind of 50% of the way there, because despite him definitely being in that kind of masterpiece scale and looking insanely cool, unfortunately he doesn't transform. So I still am hoping that with this release, potentially in the future, we could see something which looks as amazing as this does as a robot, has a proper working transformation, and then a great truck mode at the end of it, because I do just think it would create for an insane display. But as it stands, definitely one of the nicest looking Transformers Prime Optimus figures that I think we've ever seen, and this has definitely got to be in my top 3 Prime designs of all time. Definitely the best animated version of Optimus that has ever been released. I mean, look at the detail that we've got packed here into the shoulders and the collarbone. The face sculpt does just look insanely awesome, and I think one of the biggest appeals to these designs, at least for me, is that they're so stylistic, you know, in terms of the angular proportions that we've got packed into the chest. It does just look so distinctive when in comparison to anything which came before it. So yeah, definitely in terms of detail, this guy is a straight 10 out of 10, and definitely in the paintwork as well. I mean, as we spin this guy around here to the back, because he doesn't transform, probably the most animation accurate backpack that we've so far seen for a Prime Optimus Prime. I mean, we even get the wheels in the back, we get the great looking smokestacks, and just the proportions, even for the back of the elbows, does just look insanely awesome. The back of the thighs fully decked out in a nice metallic blue, and I love the detail that we've got packed into the back of the legs. I mean, we get the rear tail lights of the truck, we get a bit of suspension detail, which as you guys all know, I'm an absolute sucker for, and even the foot design is surprisingly very accurate to how it did look in the show. So yeah, design-wise, absolutely flawless. The best looking Optimus Prime that I think we've seen from Transformers Prime. Now, in terms of articulation, I think that's definitely this guy's biggest selling point. Because he doesn't transform, he can pull off pretty much any pose that you want. So in terms of the head, it will look up, it will look down. It can also go side to side, as well as rotate the full 360. In terms of the shoulders, we do get a butterfly joint, which can crunch forwards and backwards, and the chest does move along with that, which I do believe is animation accurate. This is how it looks from the back. Maybe would have been cool had they added a filler piece, because it definitely does look like he's missing a huge chunk out of the back when you use that, but definitely not too bad. The shoulders will rotate forwards and backwards. The shoulder pad itself will hinge out to the side to allow for a pretty decent kick, so that's not too bad. We also get a bicep swivel as well as a forearm swivel, which I thought was a pretty sweet touch, as well as a double jointed elbow. I mean, check that out. That is so cool, and it even does reveal some additional piston details, so I thought that was pretty sick. In terms of the hands, to be honest, I was incredibly surprised by these, because due to how slender some of these Prime designs were, I was expecting them to operate in a very similar way to some of the 3-0 DLX figures, in the sense that you'd have swappable hands, but no, each of the fingers are individually articulated, and even their design is so accurate to how they appeared in the show. So yeah, that's pretty banging. These 4 here have 2 points of articulation, whereas the thumb does have 3 due to it having a swivel, so that's pretty cool. And this piece here will also rock forwards and backwards, and you can rotate them left to right. In terms of the torso, pretty cool, so this will rock side to side. I do find it kind of strange how this piece doesn't move along with it, and the same could be said for the smokestacks. They do just stay stationary, but again, I do believe this is accurate to how the actual CGI design did operate in the show. We also do get a great crunch going forwards, although I'm going to be honest, from the back, it's nowhere near as impressive as some of those 3-0 figures, because they haven't added any additional filler pieces, meaning that you are just left with a huge gap, which does reveal some unfinished plastic, which, yeah, isn't the greatest, especially considering this does retail for a very similar price to some of those 3-0 offerings. But in terms of the waist, it will rotate the full 360, which I thought was pretty cool. Love to see drop down hips on this guy, so we can shimmy these pieces down, which allows for pretty much a head kick, and that is fantastic. We also get a double jointed knee, although something I have to mention is none of the joints, as far as I can tell, are reinforced by die cast. This is just plastic. The only die cast that I think he has is here for the skirt and here for the foot guards, which again, for something which is retailing very similarly to some of the 3-0 offerings, I definitely would have expected the same level of quality, or at least a little more die cast packed into this guy, because, you know, you're trying to advertise yourself as something which unfortunately you're just not. But anyway, in terms of the backward range, again, much like the forwards range, very impressive. They will kick out to the sides, although this is my biggest issue with this guy overall. The tolerances are trash. He is unable to withstand the own weight of his legs. So yeah, that's definitely going to be a little annoying, especially to get this guy into some dynamic poses, and this has loosened up a lot since I've got him, so I dread to think how it's going to hold up in the next few months. But we also do get a thigh swivel, and then finally, in terms of the feet, because I've already covered the knee articulation, the foot guard will pivot forwards and backwards, the foot itself will rock back, forward, tilt side to side to an exceptional range, and then finally we do get a pretty decent toe pivot. So overall, in terms of a design, as I've said, flawless, looks exactly how I remember this Optimus appearing in the show, and in terms of articulation, again, it's decent, but there are definitely a few things which, if they ever do release another Transformers Prime character, that I would definitely hope to see fixed. But yeah, all in all, a banging looking Optimus figure. Now, as we check out this Prime's accessories, because he is stacked, the first of them is this tiny little magnet, which you'll definitely need in order to activate the LED component stored in the head. Gonna be honest, guys, I don't think a tiny little push switch here for the crest would have gone amiss. I personally have never really been a huge fan of magnetic activated LED components, but anyway, you basically just hover it over his head and bang, the LEDs do turn on. Gonna be real, the component that is stored in the head is an absolute pain because it kind of rattles around in the hollow gap. There's not really a specific place and slot for it to go in, which can make aligning the tiny little light bulbs up with the head a super pain. So in the future, again, that is definitely something I hope to see them improve, but undeniably definitely does bring this guy to life. Now, in addition to the mouth guard, we also get Prime with a mouth, and I'm actually kind of glad that they did include this because, again, this was a look that we saw quite a bit in the Transformers Prime series, just as nicely detailed as the previous version. I mean, that looks really cool, especially the eye detail looking fantastic, and even the detail that we have here for the side of the helmet looks pretty impressive. So yeah, definitely I'm glad that they included this, but what would a Prime be without his weaponry? So let's get stuck into his ion blasters. And luckily he does include two of them, and they look fantastic. Now, unfortunately, these don't have an LED in them, which I think is a huge missed opportunity, especially as they were always kind of permanently illuminated in the series. I do believe that you can kind of make these blue pieces look like they're glowing if you have a black light. Unfortunately, I don't, but detail-wise, they look fantastic, and I also like how you can basically swap the hand out with these to really make it look as if though they've transformed out of the forearm, much like we saw in the series. So yeah, these are badass. Definitely some of my favourite accessories, or weapons, I guess I should say, that Prime used in the series. But because I'm a huge sucker for the Michael Bay films, I think the next ones may just top these, because we do get a pair of the Energon blades. And to be fair, the design of these is actually kind of similar to what we just saw in Rise of the Beasts, but much like the Ion Blasters, it's so great to see them kind of include these overlapping panels to, again, really make it look like these pieces have shifted around and that the blades have ejected and shot out of the forearm, much like they did in the series. So yeah, these look fantastic. I think these are the accessories that I'm going to be using on display, because you just can never get enough of the Energon blades, and this Prime was very similar to Bayverse Prime in how many Decepticons he sliced and diced. But that's not even it, because we also get the Star Saber, and not just one, we get two of them. So one that's kind of in an energized state, and then a more standard looking one. Both of them incredibly nicely detailed, although this one's more for display. We also get an additional attachment so that you can kind of sling this over Prime's back. Due to the fingers being articulated and there not really being a tab and port system in the palm of the hand, you can't really get him holding this. It's really just this one which he can wield, because it does have a pre-sculpted in hand already on the handle, which I think is pretty cool. Now, you would think that you'd be able to slide this handle off and swap it with the generic looking sword, but unfortunately you can't. This piece here is detachable, but this one is not, at least on my copy, and I definitely don't want to run the risk of breaking it. So it would have been nice had they included the option so that you could have displayed Prime with it powered down, but to be fair, energized up, it does look awesome. I mean, that transparent blue plastic looks so sick, and check out the detail that we have here for kind of the base of the Star Saber. Again, insanely accurate to how it appeared in the animation. So in terms of accessories, despite the lack of a matrix of leadership, I do believe this guy is pretty much packing all of the major weapons that we saw him use on the show. Now, as we check out a few comparisons, here we have Iron Warrior's Transformers Prime Optimus Prime alongside the 3-0 DLX Revenge of the Fallen Optimus, and in terms of scale they are very similar. I mean, almost smack onto each other, but I've got to be honest with you guys, in terms of quality they are definitely worlds apart. I mean, nowhere near as much has been packed into this Iron Warrior as we've come to expect from 3-0. The parts count, the painting, and in particular the build quality of a 3-0 absolutely decimates this Iron Warrior, which is why I said previously, for the price I definitely definitely would have expected more from this guy. He does retail very similarly to some of these officially produced 3.0 products, and I just don't think you get the same amount of quality despite him looking this awesome. The plastic doesn't feel as good, and he definitely doesn't have nowhere near as much die cast as I would have expected. But still, in terms of a display, I don't think he's going to look too out of place alongside some of these other non-transforming Transformers. Next up, here we have the APC Toys First Edition Optimus Prime, and being able to compare the transforming version to the non-transforming version really has just given me a whole new appreciation of that First Edition mold. To see that it could transform and look that accurate in terms of robot mode is just flawless. So yeah, I still am definitely holding out hope that eventually we can get something which looks as good as the Iron Warrior version, but much like the First Edition, has the capability of transformation. Here's the APC Toys Dark Master, aka Transformers Prime Megatron, and it would definitely be so awesome to see Iron Warrior release a non-transforming version of Megatron to go along with this Optimus Prime, because much like Optimus, one of the best Megatron designs in my opinion that we've ever seen. Next up, here's APC Toys Angel Engine, aka their version of Transformers Prime RC, and then finally the Transformers Legacy Leader Class Skyquake. And I'm hoping this comparison overall will really give you guys a perspective of scale, because this Optimus is a pretty mighty big piece. And so, wrapping up on this review for the Iron Warrior Transformers Prime Optimus Prime. Overall, it's a very nice looking figure in terms of detail, paint and sculpt. Hands down the most accurate version of Optimus Prime based on Transformers Prime that I think we've so far seen. But in terms of the price point and in particular the materials, I don't really think it's up to par with other official offerings which are very similarly priced to this. For example, the lack of die cast when in comparison to a 3.0 is definitely very noticeable, and the plastic, whilst definitely doesn't feel cheap, doesn't feel as sturdy as some of those official offerings, which again do retail very similarly to what they are charging for this guy. And if they ever do approach another Transformers Prime character in the future, then I do think tolerances are something which they really need to keep their eye on, because for example those hip joints are just way too loose kicking out to the side, because I've been messing around with this guy for a few days and already noticeably they are a lot looser than how they were when I got this guy out the packaging. So I dread to think of how loose they're going to become over the next few weeks. But accessories, he comes with pretty much everything I would hope to see from a Transformers Prime Optimus, with maybe the exception of the Matrix, and the LED function in the head is nice, but again, something I hope to see improved in the future, because I don't really like the whole magnetic feature, and I also don't like how there's not a specific slot and way that it is supposed to go in the head. It just kind of rattles around inside, which makes aligning the LEDs up with the eyes super frustrating. But if you like what you see here, then definitely be sure to check out the links down in the description box below. Sound off down in the comments. What do you guys think of this Iron Warrior Prime? And until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.